Welcome to the Spire Director's Commentary podcast, recorded by Grant Howitt and Chris Taylor. Following a successful Kickstarter campaign, we agreed to record commentary for each chapter of the Spire RPG, a fantasy punk game about insurrection, oppression, and horror, and release it to our backers. We wanted to talk about the decisions that led us to design Spire the way we did and show our working as best as possible. What you are about to listen to is a podcast made up of those files, arranged into blocks an hour or so long. We encourage you to start from episode 1 and move forward from there. In this episode, we cover the book's introduction, the base elements of the setting, the core mechanics that power the game, and the skills in the main system. Hello and welcome to Spire. This is an audio commentary recorded by me, Grant Howitt, and my co-author, Christopher Taylor. Say hello, Chris.
Hello.
We are looking to talk a little bit about the design decisions that we made in writing the book. So hopefully, if you're a fan of the book, you can sort of get some insight on why we did the things we did, and also just because I think this is mainly a self-indulgent process, isn't it?
And there's an element of read along with Mother.
Yes, we're hoping to do this. We'd planned to do the Unbound, so our previous Kickstarter, we planned to do Unbound, have the audio commentary for that as a chapter-by-chapter thing. That very quickly fell by the wayside when we realised how boring the later chapters would be. So we stopped doing that. And instead did it as an audio interview. But this time, we reckon the book's good enough to warrant...
The last book was good, but this one has very interesting later chapters.
Yes, certainly. And I think this has enough for an actual audio commentary. And so we are going to start... We are, from the second episode of this, or the second part of this, we're going to go along chapter by chapter in the book and see and talk about, maybe not page by page, but certainly talk about the concepts which we've outlined. So you can read along with Mother, or read along with Daddy.
Read along with Daddies, that's the one.
Read along with Daddy. The other thing I'd like you, the listener, to know is that Chris and I are both ill. We're recording this in January. We both picked up festive colds. And I think we're both in recovery, but we're still having a big proper cough every now and again. So if we sound a bit ill, that's why. We'll do our best to edit it out and make it sound super smooth. But our apologies if that doesn't work. So the first thing I'd like to talk about on this is the concept of Spire itself and where Spire arose from. And so the Spire began life as a Dark Heresy hack. Many moons ago, when I was living in Australia, probably be about 5 years ago, I was interested in fixing Dark Heresy, which is a Warhammer role-playing game, so a Warhammer 40k role-playing game where you play agents of the Inquisition. And I thought that I really liked the setting. Chris and I are both fans of the 40k setting, but it didn't quite work for us from a rule standpoint. Well, for me, certainly. It was too percentile-y.
Yeah, there's too many rules going on all over the place.
There are a lot of rules going on, but also it didn't tell the story of the Inquisition, which is what I wanted to. I wanted to tell stories about loss and giving up things and betraying people and that sort of stuff, and it never really did that. And so that developed into something I call Shadow War, which never saw the light of day, mainly for copyright issues. Because
they made their own Shadow War.
They made their own game called Shadow War, but also I don't think Games Workshop would have taken too kindly to me even filing the serial numbers off the, I suppose you'd call it the Blimperium. The Blimperium of Marn. The Empress sits upon the silver throne, guiding ships through the Bemperium with the Bastronomicon.
It's a very bee-centric culture.
Yeah, there's a lot of bees. That's the other change we've made. And so that never really saw the light of day. And then we did Unbound, and I was interested in what the next project was going to be. Chris wasn't having a great time with things at that stage in his life, and so I decided that I'd sort of focus on this on my own and go ahead and just sort of push on it on my own, rather than trying to strong-arm Chris into writing a game he wasn't hugely interested in. And so I was thinking about other settings, and one of the settings I had was Dark Elves, and Dark Elves living in a situation where Dark Elves weren't respected. because I've been interested in Dark Elves for a long time, and also interested in telling those stories and about culture clash and racial tensions within fantasy worlds, and how to explore that in ways which aren't just outright war.
Yeah.
And also which aren't just your stereotypical racist elves, which are really boring to have in a group where no one else is really racist.
Yeah, and it's weird to roleplay as a racist.
Oh, I know, right. I don't think we can trust an orc with this. Come on, dude, really?
I reckon we probably can.
That's a choice you made for a player character? You want to be an arsehole?
Yeah.
Well, all elves are arseholes. Yeah, okay, sure, but you're one of them. Anyway, so we want to try and move past that a little bit. And so I started designing Spire, and it was either called Spire or Spindle was the other name I had for it. And I decided that what I wanted to do was have a game where you played nicely dressed dark elves doing mysterious shit.
It was mainly a fashion game.
It was like, honestly, there was a lot of fashion in the first draft, and so I was like, I wanted to have big, like broad hats and long cloaks and coats and dark shades and stuff, and basically look a bit like Vampire Hunter D from the 1991 anime of the same title. Pro tip: don't go back and watch it. Don't do that. There's a robot horse in it for reasons I can't quite determine. Anywho, it's intelligent, I think. No, his hand talks to him. Anyway, that then developed into sort of like how I'd make Spire, how I'd make Spire function as a game, and how the world would work. And pretty quickly on in the process, I brought Chris on board. This is before we were a company, so this was back when we were still sort of tilting at this freelance, and I decided that it was too much for me to do on my own. Not that I wouldn't end up writing every word in the book, but having an outbrain, having a second brain to handle the weight of the setting and the rules seemed like a good idea. Also, I love Chris and want to do things with him. So then I hired Chris. I brought Chris on board. You know, it's a partnership, it's egalitarian. And we decided that we would start doing Spire together. And at that point, it was an espionage game, which was the main difference.
It was Spycraft.
It was Spycraft. And so I did a lot of research around Spycraft and around cells and around other... I say a lot of research. I think I read 2 spy role-playing games. I'm not going to read actual Spycraft books.
No.
I don't believe in doing research. That's what you're for. You have the sort of brain which doesn't just sort of slip off the third paragraph of an article, which I like.
Make a note of it.
Yeah, making notes, which is always good. And so we weren't sure what the espionage was for or who you were working for. It didn't quite ring true. And then Chris had this great idea about Revolution, and so I'm going to hand over to Chris now to talk about Revolution, because I've been talking for the last half an hour.
That is fun. The problem with it being as a spy game is that we didn't really have an antagonist faction.
No.
We didn't have any pushback against that, aside from just going, well, there's other Dark Elves and they're very spooky too.
Yeah, there wasn't a... there weren't other spies.
Yeah, there was just you. And aside from the odd bit of industrial espionage, there wasn't actually that much happening.
No.
So when we hit upon the idea of shifting it to a revolution game, suddenly we got the antagonist built in.
Yeah.
With the Elfir.
Well, we already had the Elfir there, but they weren't, the war against them wasn't so... It didn't quite feel so important. It was more like, we're going to do these things, and then we're going to basically bother the Elfir and steal from them, rather than we're going to take the city back by force. But not war. We're going to do it through subterfuge. And so, we kept the ideas of the espionage and of subterfuge and of functioning under the radar, because you are operating as... It's more of a paramilitary cell, I think.
Yeah, it's that underground rebellion rather than protests in the streets.
Yeah, and I think, protests in the streets is the natural end point of a Spire campaign.
Yeah.
But we wanted to detail with a bit where, you're being stamped down upon, and so you're pushing back against that. Because it was an interesting story, and not one that we'd seen told in, really, role-playing games.
Yeah, and in a lot of our playtesting, the games do end in riots.
Almost every single one ends in a riot.
Yeah.
I think that's because you and I like riots.
Yeah.
And plus, we play it pretty fast and loose, and it's sort of yeah, why not? So whatever players ask, as long as it's moderately reasonable, we'll let them get away with it. And riots are a really easy thing to enjoy. I mean, shit. Like, I think at least one of the characters we've got. Oh, sorry, there will be swearing in this. At least one of the characters we've got has create riot once a session power.
Yeah, and at higher levels, be a riot.
Yes, become riot. So that's kind of fun. And we developed it out. We'd not really taken a turn at doing a serious world before.
No, because we did Unbound, which was a generic RPG.
Universal,
yes. Generic does sound bad.
It's a bit pejorative.
Yeah. And we wanted to do something with a more clearly defined setting. We still didn't want to go all the way with defining the setting.
We've gone pretty far.
Yeah, but a big thing is that we don't go to like the timetables of trains level. We
No,
keep
certainly
everything
not.
so that it's usable and interesting rather than grinding down into the tiny details.
Well, we wanted to write from a story focus first.
Yeah.
And the idea that we give you a hook that you can explore. The idea that I think the idea of Spire is as well is that it will change. Like, you will change the city through play, and so what we wanted to write was something which, with like the start of something, which then you change and build your own, and it goes off and does itself. And that's how, like, you level up by changing you level up by changing the city and changing the world around you, which was a playtesting. It's something which arose out of playtesting by one of my playtesters, a woman called Lisa Trott, who I am incredibly thankful for basically making Spire work.
Who solved the problem for some reason we couldn't.
Yeah, so that was really neat. And so we wanted to have a fantasy city which felt like it was changing, and to give players and GMs the license to change it and the license to make it their own. And like, it's interesting reading about Blood and Dust, which was the sample adventure which we gave out to Kickstarter backers. That was how people are already changing it. So like, one of the characters, one of the upgrades for one of the characters is you can get a rowboat, which is a bit daft.
It is a bit daft,
but you also get like a reputation.
Yeah.
And
a title.
And a title, yeah, you're a Knight Admiral at that point. And the GM at that point was like, well, there's going to be rivers fucking everywhere now, because I want them to take the boat to things.
Yeah.
And so they've started taking the boat, and like, so they've got underground rivers going through things, and similarly, another person was saying how, like, oh, like when I run Spire, there are giant carp in the rivers alongside, and the drow ride them. Like, fuck it, alright, sure, whatever,
yeah,
sounds good. Yeah, honestly, I wish I'd had that idea, that sounds great. And I think for me, in between writing Unbound and writing Spire, I went on, this is going to sound really fucking wanky, I went on a creative retreat to Costa Rica.
Sounds super wanky, yeah.
It does, and so, like, one thing, should say, I paid for my plane tickets. I want to say it wasn't all expenses paid. Like, I paid for my plane tickets, paid for my travel, and they paid for the hotel room and the food and stuff. But it's a yearly retreat, I suppose, called /Story. It's run by Christy Denner and Lance Weller. I don't know how his surname's pronounced, but his first name's Lance. That's all you need, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it was what we did there was incredibly obfuscated, and we're encouraged not to discuss it with the outside world.
I think you joined a cult, mate.
Sorry?
I think you joined a cult.
It was fucking culty from the outside. Inside, basically what we did, and I'm gonna part the kimono a little bit. I'm gonna pull back the curtain. We just sort of hung out and talked about what we did for a while, and in a place where we didn't have to worry about our work calling us and having to do things, you know, we were there just to be separate from normal life, and we had wonderful surroundings, and it was all like our travel and stuff with our transport in Costa Rica was covered, and we just sort of got to be around other creative people for a while. And for me, certainly, there was this question, and this is fairly far off a chapter by chapter reading of Spire, so feel free to skip to the next episode if you like. But there was a section where, we were asking each other, why do we create? Why do we do what we do? And so someone said, well, it's for the love, isn't it? You know, we do it because we love people, and we do it because we want to create things that are great in the world and share things with people. And I was like, oh, I do it because there's a howling void in my chest, which I need to fill. I need to fill with the temporary praise of my peers. And that was kind of an eye-opener for me, and I think I was creating for the wrong reasons. And if you look at my work up until Spire, there was very much the idea of I kept everything at arm's length. I described everything in very vague terms, and we kept Unbound doesn't have a setting because I think I was scared of putting one forward.
Well, also we were trying to make a system where you generate the setting as you go.
And I will say, it's cracking for doing that.
Yeah.
It's as far as the actual play systems go, it's fine. I'm happy with it. But the whole world creation bit and that reflecting of the characters, I'm really proud of what we managed to do there. I think that's beautiful, and I think it does it better than any other game. It doesn't do everything better than every other game, but it does that session 0 really well, and I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, for sure.
But now doing Spire, there was this sensation that I wanted to share something with the world, and I felt comfortable enough in my own abilities to say, hey, here's my world, here's what I think is interesting, here's my 12th level paladin, as it were. Here's the special world that I've made with my friend Chris. Elves, right? In this one they wear trousers. Oh, how fascinating. And then I rolled a 5 and he rolled a 6.
Hello, Calais.
Yeah. So there's as you can tell from my ironic detachment, there's still some fear over telling people stories rather than making them make their own. Well, so letting them make their own. But just dropping my glasses. I think we've done something really cool with Spire. I think we've taken fantasy and we've put our own spin on it, and it's not unique. We've drawn a lot of other, we've drawn a lot of sources of inspiration. But I think we've come up with something which is really cool. What were your biggest sources of inspiration on Spire, Chris?
Source of inspiration? I mean, a lot of it...
Where did you steal Spire from?
A lot of it was the kind of books I read as a child.
Oh, yeah?
The Gormenghast end of the spectrum.
Big Creepy City.
Big Creepy City. But also those sorts of mini TV series that cropped up around that time.
Oh.
There was one called Cold Train.
Right.
Which is an odd post-apocalyptic British TV show. Which was very much ahead of its time.
Right.
In that it was, it wasn't on super late and it had a crucifixion on screen.
Oh, yum. Fantastic.
Yeah. But I drew a lot from series like that, those sorts of dire, desperate times. Yeah,
and also closed narratives as well. In terms of this is what the story's about, and it's not like Game of Thrones where it's about there are 5 stories going on at any point, and we focus on any given one. It's about this group of people.
Yes, and
telling the story
to them, and what is interesting here.
Yeah, which is, and I quite prefer telling stories in that way myself. Actually, I find it's a bit more satisfying from the scope of role playing terms. It's quite difficult to do your big Game of Thrones, 10-year campaigns.
Yeah, and one of the big issues with something like the Game of Thrones style is that there's so many implications to every action.
Yeah, and plus they have teams of writers.
Yeah, they do have teams of writers.
And actors, rather than just some spods who've come over to my house who are making it up, and we're all making it up as we go along.
Yeah, but with Spire and with that closed network, you know all the different variable factors.
Yeah.
And you know how it will affect them equally, so it's a lot easier to run.
I think also the other thing, I remember you telling me about a magic system which had different magic for men and women. and like weavers and destroyers or something. Was it?
The Wheel of Time.
Wheel of Time. I remember, like, because I haven't read it, but like looking at the way in which we've treated magic in Spire, and like the way that there's something inherently destructive about it. Yeah, there's something corrupting about it.
So the Wheel of Time has a magic system which is split by the genders. Mm-hmm. So the male. Start that again. The male half is a sort of tainted magic that hurts you to use it, and the female half is a clean version that's fine to use.
It's kind of what we did with Blood Witches.
Yeah, exactly.
Which we'll get to in a bit. Yeah.
But also the way that we split divine and occult casting. There's a clean, sanitized version of magic, and there's an avant-garde version of magic where you're on the edge. Which and then arcane and divine spellcasting is obviously from Dungeons and Dragons. It's that's kind of where we got it from, and where there's one of the originators of the idea. I honestly I don't know what the originator. I'm sure it comes from a book somewhere. Probably, I don't know what that is. But there's no mechanical difference between the two, aside from what spells you can pick if you worship a god, as opposed to if you read books. Yeah.
And we wanted, I think, to underline the fact that I like the idea in Spire that all magic is a cult. It's just some of it's really old, so it gets called religious.
Yeah, and I mean that's a big decision that you can make as part of your campaign.
Yeah,
like, are the gods real?
Yeah, or are they just?
Or are they just,
masks that we're putting on power?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's are demons real as well? Are demons a form of god, etc., etc. And like we've got our own theories for how Spire works. But one of the very interesting things about writing it was in Unbound we didn't have a setting, so we didn't have to worry about canon.
Yeah.
And by which I mean obviously like canonical truth, rather than big guns. And in Spire we've entered this really fascinating stage where whatever Chris and I say in Spire is canonical, but we can differ from each other.
Yeah.
And that's super fascinating, because there's not one true method of Spire. And also, like, when we run games of Spire, our Spires are different.
Very much so, yeah.
We're not running like off the verbatim Bible of Spire. We've got our own thing. And so it's really interesting to create this world which is shared, and any answer we give, even if they're contradictory, are correct. which I really like. And so it's been fascinating. But like the other thing is, so like we do all the writing together, or like I'll write it and Chris will give it the okay. And that means that we can understand what Spire is together. And we know what makes sense in fiction. And occasionally one of us will say something like, I'm going to try something here and we'll see if it'll land. And sometimes it's a bit weird and we'll pull it back, or we'll push it in a different direction. Yeah. No, that's a bit. Yeah, there are certain topics which had to be redacted. Excised. Certain ideas I had which had to be excised from the final draft, and maybe we'll talk about those later, who knows. Maybe. But it's been fascinating to have this, just that level of trust, I suppose, with you, in having we have built this world together, and we are both the final authority on it. And as we work together, we've managed to improvise this world, and we can get a feeling for it and get an understanding of it. And that's really lovely to do.
Yeah, it has been genuinely entertaining to write this book.
Yeah, and also to read it. Honestly, like it's nice to go back and read it, because it's nearly 100,000 words long, so I've forgotten most of it now. Yeah. And occasionally I look over stuff and go, "Oh, how clever of us!"
Oh, well done,
well done us. So I think we'll cut this introduction here, and then the next audio file you have should be actually reading the book. So please grab your copy of Spire, or load up your copy of Spire, and scroll through to the bit which says "Welcome to Spire." Are you sitting comfortably?
Bums on seats, people. Come on.
Bums on seats, eyes down. Let's get reading. This is serious now.
Welcome to Spire.
Welcome to Spire. Sit down. We're going to do a serious reading. So let's read the intro to here. This is Spire, a mile-high city in the land of Destera, ruled by cruel high elves, in which the drow, you and your family and your friends, have been oppressed for centuries. a nightmare warren of twisting passages and structures built and rebuilt atop itself, a city of 1,000 gods, the furthest bastion of a terrible and burgeoning empire, a structure of unknown make that houses a blistering, rotten hole in reality at its centre, where the sane dare not tread. Sounds like a nice place for a holiday, doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
You know what we should have got? We should have got, like 1920s tourism posters done of the different districts.
Oh, that would be lovely.
That'd look cracking. So, well, maybe we could do that. I don't know. We don't really have enough money left.
We have spent rather a lot of money on art already.
Yes, that's true. Okay. One thing I want to mention, actually, quite quickly off here, is the concept of the land of Destera.
Which came in real late.
I think that's the last thing we added to the book.
Yeah.
We didn't name the area where Spire was. And Mary, our business partner, and my wife partner, said, like, sort of flag that to us at the very, as we were putting the manuscript over for layout. We hadn't named where it was, and we had to try and come up with a fantasy name for it. And so we picked a noble drow house from our list of drow houses. And it turns out Destera was the one we hadn't really written anything about.
But it came with some nice plot attached to it, so it worked out.
What was that plot?
Well, the Desterans lost Spire in the war.
Mm-hmm.
And so their house is now kind of looked down upon because it was them that lost Spire.
Yeah, so like one of the interesting things about writing the idea of drow nobility is the idea of drow nobility. I've always figured there's been drow nobility because I really like telling high society stories. I think they're fun.
Yeah.
Or stories which have the contrast of high and low society. And so I'd mentioned drow nobles ever since like the first draft of what Spire could be. And then we were writing up the Vermissian Sage, who is one of the character classes we'll get to later, and we had a spell called Dynastic Memory where they can channel the ancient bloodlines of the drow, and so like we figured every drow has some of an ancient bloodline in them, and they can channel that and get some sort of magic power off it. And so we had to name the drow noble houses, and then we had to give them characters, and then from that it started sort of, what's the word?
Spiraling?
Yes, spiraling out of that. And so now like they've all got their own characters, the drow noble houses. The first splat book we're writing after the Kickstarter is High Society, and we've done like quite a lot of detail. I say quite a lot of detail, a full paragraph on each.
But essentially it's entirely informed by one spell from one character.
Yeah, and things just got out of hand. But it's lovely to have it arise organically from that, rather than like sitting down and being, okay, what are the noble houses? We were like, we need a noble house for every skill, so we can have a buff to skills. And things sort of arose, and it's not a buff to skills anymore. That's changed, and so the whole thing has kind of grown organically. And like I think one of the scarier things about releasing the book is we have to sort of stop.
Yeah, it's we have to not writing it.
We have to cement it, and like we're doing not retconning, but we're doing some light exploration of stuff in the High Society book, where we're taking things from the core book and exploring them to the point where we are sort of changing them.
Yeah.
But I like the idea that Spire is changing, and so when we write about it, that's what it's like at time of writing, as it were.
Yeah, I mean that's one of its core themes is change. Yeah.
So let's talk about the most important thing in Spire, which is I refuse to use the singular version of dice.
Yeah, you'll notice that throughout the text, dear reader.
We do not use the word die to refer to a single dice. We know it's correct. But it just, like, no, I don't think I've ever said, hey, pass me a die. I want to roll it to see what I get. It's always pass me that dice.
Yep.
And so that's just a thing. And you can correct me as many times as you want. I refuse to accept
it's not
it.
Going in.
It is the hill on which I will dice.
Well played.
Thank you. So the first chapter is kind of an intro to the thing. It's just a rough idea of, hey, this is a role-playing game. Which, when like we put a very short idea in there, it's weird because like we figure like most role-playing games aren't going to be the first role-playing game you read.
No.
Just by the law of probability, you're going to read one and it's probably going to be Dungeons and Dragons or something along those lines. So I don't think you need a great deal of explaining what a role-playing game is. But one thing I did want to do is put in right at the top, being a player.
Yes, your role as being a player.
And this is something which we focused on really heavily with Unbound as well, is how a lot of books are like, here's how to be a games master, and when it comes to being a player, it's just like, just do what you feel. No, if anything, it's more difficult because you have fewer tools.
You've got less levers to push and more to do.
Yeah, and so we wanted to get right up at the front, saying it's your job to make a brilliant story full of ups and to help the games master and the other players make a brilliant story full of ups and downs. It's up to you to get your character into trouble and maybe out of trouble and tell an engaging story with the other players. And that I think was really important. We wanted to get that across. It's just fuck up your character as much as you can, please.
Yeah, just plunge them into danger.
Yeah. And we go on to sort of just say how we differentiate our fantasy from the other one.
So I think this is actually a really important section of the book.
Please talk about it.
I mean, it's summed up beautifully by its headlines, and the headlines describe Spire really succinctly. Magic is hard. Magic items are rare. We're not off to the wilderness. There's no morality system, and there aren't any monsters.
I think the last one's really important.
Yeah, well, but just running down, magic and the two magic ones. Magic items are rare, incredibly rare.
One of the things which people have said when they've read Spire is that it feels cyberpunk.
Yeah.
And I think we wanted to take religion and magic as a form of... So we called it fantasy punk in the Kickstarter. And so we take traditional fantasy tropes and then give them to wealthy people. And your game... And the game is about wrenching them off them. So, high elves have a lot of magic items around them. They treat them as, rather than +1 swords, we're talking, central heating or central cooling in the high elves. But they're hard, and magic is... They're hard to get, and you sure as shit can't make them. They're naturally occurring in other places.
Yeah. And
we wanted it to be something which you have to steal.
Yeah, which automatically gives you plots if you want it.
Go on with magic is hard, sorry.
We wanted magic to be interesting and costly. One of the things I always loved about BRP was its Call of Cthulhu magic system, where you end up losing hit points, and your physical appearance can go down, and every spell costs you something big.
Yeah.
So we boiled that down into the current casting system. But magic is hard. Magic is taxing on a body.
Yeah, there's no free spells, as it were. You can't memorize spells and then, I'm out of spells. You can keep pushing yourself as far as you want, but you will die. Yeah,
exactly.
Or you will go broke. You will get found out.
And that's kind of key to Spire, really.
Very much so.
And the next one, we're not off to the wilderness. This is Spire itself is an urban campaign.
It's not Points of Light. I love Points of Light as a setting. I think it's really fun.
Yeah,
but it's not that.
But it's in one mammoth city.
Yeah, we say mile high. I don't know how big Spire is.
It's a lot. It's a lot bigger than a mile.
Yeah. It's absurdly tall. And I think, also we acknowledge that Spire should not exist even within our world with magic in.
Yes.
It's that Spire doesn't make physical sense, and it's a bit like bees flying. Please don't look too hard at Spire or it will fall over. And so, at the centre of it, we have the heart, which is our big hole that weird stuff comes out of, because we like eldritch horror. And also, there's also a traditional idea that the deeper you go into somewhere, the weirder it becomes. You know, the Heart of Darkness, that sort of thing.
Further down the dungeon levels,
the more uncanny, the more away you get from light and civilization, the place you know, the stranger it becomes. And we wanted to put that in the middle of the city rather than somewhere distant. So basically, it can always, and then we punctured it with an underground train network. So basically, we can always have something horrendous shamble out of a corridor. Go on. On the morality system.
The next one is there's no morality system. We don't have chaotic good, lawful evil.
I don't think most people use that these days. Anyway,
no, I know they don't use it, but also it's an interesting point to explicitly make. because you're going to be killing some good people for good reasons.
Yeah, you are, in a way, the baddies.
Yeah, like, it's all about how far you're willing to go to get a job done. And without a morality system, there's no hard and fast way of going, well, that person's lawful good.
Yeah. And, like, it seems a bit edgy, you know? A bit sort of like, oh, well, you know, it's all shades of grey, man. And it's like, I think there is a level of edge to it, but also, like, those are the stories I'm interested in telling.
Yeah,
it's like,
also,
well, why are you doing that?
Why are
you
doing
doing
shades of grey?
Yes, everything is shades of grey in real life. And I think that, like, in your Dungeons and Dragons, it's really fun to be sort of, no, we are noble warriors for good, and we're going to go and do good. And there's kind of, like, there's a security in that. There's a security in never examining what lawful good means.
Never really break that down.
Because lawful good means in accordance with the state.
Yes.
And that's like you can do some reprehensible things and have them still be lawful good because you've done it versus an orc. The other thing which I really want to underline is there aren't any monsters. I said that there'd be something shambling out of a cupboard because we had the train line pierce the heart. The idea is that everything in Spire was a person.
Yes.
Or is a person. And, like, one thing which we've been really keen to do when we're doing published adventures, and when we're telling our stories, it's not like, oh, there's a big nasty demon that's in charge, or, oh, it's orcs, and orcs are chaotic evil. No, they're all just people, and they're people you hate, and they're people who would have you ground into the dirt, but everyone's a person.
Yeah.
And at the end, like, most Spire campaigns end with you killing a normal person.
Yes.
Just unlike they do extraordinary things. But once you hit the end of the conspiracy, there's just a person who you can strangle.
Yeah, and I mean, interestingly, like, it's not... That person that you strangle isn't a 20th level archmage.
No.
They're just a person generally with more political clout than you.
Yeah, and more money.
Yeah.
Like, they have more money and resources, and it's about overcoming that. And, like, we have Blood Witches, I think, which is one of the player classes from one of the Splat books, and that they are sort of hovering zoetrope nightmares. Who do things like warp the land around them because of the blood magic they've picked up, but they're people.
Yeah, and they look normal most of the time.
Yeah, and I think one of the things which always bothered me about your traditional Dungeons and Dragons and your traditional fantasy is that you say there are monsters, but these are people with cultures. Orcs have art, orcs have cultures, orcs have, you know, cuisine.
Yeah,
and just because it's different from the norm, they're defined as lawful as chaotic evil, and, like, they go on to say that evil people do things for their own good above the good of others, and, like, in that like, capitalism is not therefore good. Capitalism is self-interested. Primarily, it's about making sure you're okay before, you know, put on your own gas mask before you fit one to your child, that sort of thing. And there's nothing inherently good about that, and Dungeons and Dragons runs in either a feudalist or capitalist society, neither of which are good. And so it's interesting to see. And the orcs look out for each other. Yeah,
I mean they have a coherent culture.
Yeah,
and it's very, very, very difficult to do if you're chaotic.
Yeah, like, I could argue that rats are monsters, in that rats don't have a culture. Rats aren't intelligent in the same way that sentient beings are, like orcs, humans, elves, that sort of thing. Yeah. And so, basically, if you take the idea of rats and scale those up, then you can get, you know, big fucking monsters, and that's fine. But I think we've got big spiders.
We have big spiders. There are a couple of monsters.
Ghost plagues.
Yeah, but
made of people.
Yeah, but they're few and far between.
Yeah.
And it's generally because a human's done something stupid.
Yeah, I've certainly not used one in a game, I don't think. Ghouls as well, but again, monsters. Humans.
Yeah, humans.
Humans, or people rather than humans, as it were.
Yeah.
It's been very interesting trying to write around a game where you do not play human characters, but you play people.
Yeah, for sure.
That's always pretty challenging. I think we're about to wrap up on this chapter, but the last thing is kind of an overview of the idea of stress. Should we save that for the stress chapter?
I think we should, actually. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, let's wrap up this chapter, and we'll
come back to you with the next one.
Come back to you with the next one. Goodbye. Now we're going to move on to the rules in this one. So if you turn to page 9,
we hope.
Right, I assume page 9 of the book. We're going off the last but one proofs of the book, so hopefully we should be fine. But if it's not page 9, the bit that says the rules in big letters on the top,
super easy to find. You'll get a hang of it.
Yeah, and we are going to we're going to discuss the core mechanic, which is the beating heart of Spire. Actually, the beating heart of Spire is the heart.
Yeah.
Or the works, I guess. But point is, mechanically, this is what makes Spire work.
Yep.
This is our 15th or 16th attempt at making a core mechanic.
We make a lot of core mechanics.
It came down to, we had a D20 system with roll for defense against your resistances.
Mm-hmm.
And we had, but that had a. They got a bit tricky because you only roll for defense if you failed the initial roll.
Yeah, it just didn't.
It just didn't work. Like you'd fail a stealth check, and then you'd have to roll against your shadow to see if that caused problems. And like the story ticked forward, it was okay, but
it wasn't really rules informing setting informing rules.
No, and so I ran a couple of sessions of that. It wasn't quite singing for me. I sat down and came up with this core mechanic on a train, I believe, and it's what's endured. It's tremendously straightforward. It's not too dissimilar from Apocalypse World, except it doesn't use the same dice or rules.
And it still plays right into my weird number blindness sometimes, where I for some reason I cannot remember this table.
I have problems myself. It's 8 is good. 8 up is good.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
And I'm sure of that. And I think, well, I should probably still check the table.
Yeah. The core mechanic of Spire is you grab a dice or more. It has a rather unintuitive Grant Howitt rule in it, which I don't like, which is you always roll 1 dice, and then your skills and domains add dice on top of that.
Yep.
And people still struggle with that. They struggle to remember that you roll 1 dice. They'll just roll a dice for their skill and their domain. And like I think that's because it evokes World of Darkness and having like a stat plus skill. Whereas ours are more, ours are just boosting that single dice you roll. Anyway, you roll between 1 and 4 dice. I think there's one dice. There's one power that lets you roll 5 dice.
Yeah, it does crop up.
But it's very rare. Generally, you're rolling about 2 or 3. You pick the highest, and then you consult this table. And the core mechanic runs off something called stress. Well, also, as it turns out, Blades in the Dark runs off stress, Chris.
Oh, good.
I'll be honest with you. I hadn't read Blades in the Dark before I wrote this game.
No, I started playing it. I had an online game of it after we'd finished it and after we'd done all the Kickstarter and everything like that. And I played it like, they use some very similar words to us, don't they?
Oh, shit. And like it's a fantastic game, beautifully done as well.
They're very different games. I would like to point out.
One of my fantastic. John Uppert is one of my favourite game designers. They are very different games, although they both deal with cells in a urban punk fantasy universe. Anyway, and also the art style's similar. Also, but they're very different games, and one of them did very well.
Wow.
Anyway, let's talk about the book. Stress is the important thing here. We wanted to have the idea that stress is bad. It is a sort of hovering, nondescript badness. And you can allocate it to different parts, but it has no concrete feedback until it manifests into fallout.
Yep.
It's a bit like having... I suppose it's a bit like hit point damage, but if the more hit points lost, the more fucked you were when eventually you take an injury.
Yeah, I mean, the other way is to think of it as the amount of risk you're taking.
Yes.
And the amount of issues you've got yourself into.
Yeah, danger.
Yeah. And then when you check for fallout and when you get fallout, some of the stress is cleared. Mm-hmm. And then you get a concrete feedback of what that stress and risk meant
in the mechanics rather than just the fiction.
Yeah.
and that means that it also means that you can have we've got 5 stress tracks, which are blood, mind, silver, shadow, and reputation.
Mm-hmm.
Reputation was the latest one we added when we decided that we didn't have any way to get embarrassed
for social combat sections.
Basically, yeah, and also like we were like, oh, we can't penalise people for fucking up socially.
Plus,
so we put in rep.
I'd like to point out one of my playtesters has found a way to reputation tank.
Is that the knight?
Yeah, you can you can make a knight who just takes all the hits to his reputation, which is quite interesting.
Well, one of the mid-level knight powers is with my reputation.
Yeah.
Or like bulletproof reputation. It just lets you allocate any stress to rep because you're you know what, you're just too famous for that to happen.
Yeah,
it's really it's tremendously good fun. And so with that, it means that whatever the fiction dictates, you can allocate stress to. So you don't have to say like in a fight, it doesn't all have to be stress against blood, which is our physical stress track. You've got mind stress because you do something horrific or you see something horrific.
Yep.
Or you've got mind stress because someone's fighting you and that's stressful. You've got reputation if you fuck up a roll and your mates are watching. You've got shadow if you have a big brawl in a public space.
People remember your faces, etc.
Yeah. We've tried to make all of these stresses equal in terms of the effect they have on the game, and I think generally you wind up using blood more often because people resort to violence.
Yeah.
And also because we've been quite careful to make almost no one good enough at fighting.
So people are pretty good at fighting?
Some people are pretty good at fighting, but crucially, I think in Spire, no one's good enough.
No.
To just fight.
And with the advances and stuff, you can build yourself into fighting.
Yeah, for sure, but it's generally better to try other things first. Like, can you buy the problem?
Yes, can you
lie to the problem? Can you get your mate to go and do this? And that's always pleasing. But stress then resolves into fallout. Basically, you roll a d10 every time a character receives stress, and if it's under their total stress, that manifests into fallout. There is a variant of doing stress, which it's on the stress on that particular resistance, which is what Chris used for a while.
Yep, I used that in one of my first playtests.
It's
a lot kinder.
But I like really fucking people up.
Yeah, the brutal version leads to more haphazard stories.
Yeah,
maybe haphazard isn't the right word, but swingy stories.
Well, actually, not swingy. Sorry, kicky. In that everything's fine, and then just someone kicks in the door and removes all your teeth.
Yeah, whereas the other version is a lot easier to track and understand how hurt you are. So there's 3 different kinds of fallout: minor, moderate, and severe.
Yeah, and
minor fallout will be, as it quite rightly says, minor things like bleeding, panic. But also, it's interesting that some of the fallout on reputation is things like lie. Whereas trying to justify your actions, you tell a lie that will cause a problem this or next session.
And that's it was a really deliberate action on our parts. One of the things which I really hate is the death spiral, which is I'm going to say a zone in central London where you enter, and your senses are over. No. It's a game design term where when you take damage, you get worse at things, so you're more likely to take damage. So you take more damage and get worse at things, then you die. And that's a really good way of modelling what actually happens when you get hurt, but doesn't make very interesting stories.
Not so much on the fun front.
So when we've got things like lie, trying to justify your actions, you tell a lie that will cause a problem this or next session. We're sort of leaning in and saying and we're scene framing with that. We're giving them a suggestion because one of the problems which we've had, which I often feel, is that players are unwilling to do things like back down from scenes when they fail social roles.
Yeah.
They'll just keep pushing, they'll just keep going until they get... Because they're not used to having, okay, you know what, this scene's done, there's no way you can get past that, you can just keep trying different things. And so we wanted to have sort of like... to give you a role-playing prompt with all of these. And every Fallout, we hope, pushes the story forwards rather than backwards. It moves it on, it adds a layer. Even things like Unconscious, which is moderate blood Fallout. you fall unconscious, and you fall unconscious for several hours, during which time your enemies get an advantage.
Yeah, so it moves the story on while you're asleep, essentially.
Yeah, precisely. And through that, we've tried to we've tried to apply it to everything, right up to the severe fallout at the end, which is like you now have a new character arc. Yeah. From that, whether that's dying or not.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, there is no dead.
No, there's
fallout.
dying.
There's dying, but no straight up dead. You're dying. Choose: do something useful before you die, or desperately try to cling to life and lose something vital.
Which means that you can. Yeah, it's like at this point we sort of go up into slightly different rules.
Yes,
because we feel it's important enough. It's not happening every single time. The first character death I ever had in Spire, it was we were playing the Blood and Dust playtest. The starter set you get when you back the Kickstarter, which you will have received if you're listening to this, I imagine. And Dacienne, the Lejeanne, the moon priestess, she got shot and started bleeding out, and dropped to dying basically on a balcony while the knight was being I think throttled by a retro engineer, and her player Paul was like, well, I'm going to do one last thing. I'm going to throw myself off the balcony and knock that guy off the knight, so the knight survives. And because you get to roll with mastery, I think she was rolling 4 dice, and she got a 1. Basically, I think, or 3 was the highest number on her dice, and so like we just had it. We had it happen out of focus in the this guy strangling the knight, and then just behind him, Dacienne falls from the balcony and breaks her neck. And also, she had a spell which she was running, which gave everyone walkie-talkies, basically magic walkie-talkies, like a mind link, and everyone just heard her neck breaking, and then the radios died.
Oh,
and it was a really, and like even though it was really sad, and it was kind of funny, and then kind of sad again. Even though like it wasn't that defiant last act, but I'll remember that far more than a defiant last act where she did really well and did awesome. But it was like, this is really important to me. I think one of the things which I wanted to put into Spire, and which I want to put into every game, is allowing players to say, this is important to me, and give them spotlight time.
Yeah,
give them attention, give them
that
feedback.
Was crucial when we were writing all of the rules, all of the setting.
Yeah.
It's showing off what a player can do and how you can make something your moment.
Yeah, and as you get into the severe fallout, you've got some weird ones. For example, like turned. Yes. means that you are now working for the enemy, and hopefully you've been because this is severe fall, it isn't going to happen as a sudden thing, which you're not just going to walk down the street and suddenly, oh, you know what, I'm going to work for the Crimson Vigil. It will grow hopefully over the course of at least a session, and you can flash back and do explanations and things like that. But the fact that you can lose enough money that your character gets into debt and then they turn against the Ministry. And I think it comes from a style of role-playing which Chris and I espouse, which is tell us what's happening and then we'll rationalise it with our characters, rather than look at the characters and rationalise the events.
Yeah, for sure.
That's much more interesting. We can also talk briefly about Bond Fallout. Yeah,
so quick rundown of what a Bond is.
Yeah.
A Bond is an NPC individual faction. There's various levels, and we'll talk about bonds again later. But bonds can suffer their own form of fallout as you push them and as you use people as things.
Yeah, as you get them to do things. They roll just like a character.
Yeah.
Basically.
So they can suffer their own fallout.
Stress. Yeah.
And that goes all the way from... There's blowback onto you, like mistake. Your bond's actions raise suspicion, so you start taking shadow, as maybe they spilled the beans on something,
or just rather than spilling the beans, it's like, why is that guy poking around there?
Yeah,
and the police get interested. All the way up to
things like betrayal, where your bond has turned against you, and they won't tell you until it's too late.
and that's very pleasing to have that sort of happen. And it's always the player's fault. If you ignore the bond, it will not hurt you. If you don't try and use it, so that's quite pleasing. And again, like we've tried to have those push forward stories. We've tried to make the most rules we have in the game, because the rules chapter is about 7 pages long.
Yep,
very short. But we wanted to have rules which make the masochistic experience of wanting to get fucked up
and that's
interesting and rewarding and fun.
Players drive themselves to get messed up in this game.
Oh my days, yeah, it's so much fun, isn't it?
Yeah, they will jump off bridges, they will do whatever they need to do to start taking stress and fallout.
Yeah. And it's like, I think as long as you make it, because like no one's really eager to take hit point damage in D&D.
Yeah.
But if you can get games where they give you feedback and they give you attention and they give you output from that input, people will take damage, people will jump off bridges, people will sell out their friends.
Yeah.
It all happens. It's great. And that is the rules chapter. So I'm going to put in a little break here.
Okay.
Welcome back. Welcome to Skills and Domains. Chris, which do you prefer, skills or domains?
Domains.
I like domains too. But let's talk about skills first.
Alright.
We have had the idea of characters like knocking around for a while. One of the first drafts I had, it had your characters as it was more of a skill package you got.
Yeah.
And so
like the old kits.
Yeah, so like if you were a knight, you got the fight skill, you got the crime domain, that sort of thing. But that didn't quite work. And like I think like we had, like, rather than having class powers, we had skill powers. Mm-hmm. So you had like different powers you could buy from Compel, as it were. And again, like we were taking these, like they were pretty close to the once per session, once per situation powers, which we have in the classes, but they were very much around scene framing and, you know, spotlight time. But we scrapped those and had it more class based because that seemed better.
Yeah, it definitely felt better once we started testing it out.
Yeah, and I really like classes, and I think it helps to have something which you can latch onto and say, like, rather than buying 3 backgrounds. Like, I appreciate it offers a lack of let's say verisimilitude. It encourages people to at least possibly skew towards stereotypes in that all knights go in a certain way, you know. And that's the thing. Once you're aware of those stereotypes, then you can skew away from them. But it means once, like in your first game, you end up playing with a group of people who are you end up playing with a group of characters who are very stereotypical.
Yeah, I mean, it increases accessibility, if nothing else.
That's the other thing. It increases accessibility and means that you can say, I understand this character class, I want to plug into the world in this way, rather than ending up with, say, the World of Darkness issue, which you have, in that it's very hard to determine, like, in Team Fortress 2 terms, you know a character's silhouette.
Yeah.
So, like, if you catch Team Fortress 2 as a PC game, it's ancient now. Actually. Well, it's pretty old now, and it's a bit like your Overwatches, you know, your Paladins, and the character design is absolutely perfect in that you can tell which type of character you're facing in a split second. No matter
before they added all the extra
stuff. And you've got hats and shit, you know, whatever. But the body shapes of each character are very different, and I like that. The thing about character classes in the Dungeons and Dragons, for example, is they give you this very clean, crisp silhouettes, so you can understand what's going on. So we have a cleric, and like I know that clerics can be of any one of 100 gods, but you've got an idea of what a cleric looks like, and then and then you can play with and invert that. And similarly, in World of Darkness, you don't have that. You build your character from the ground up by choosing skills and backgrounds and abilities and that sort of thing. And it means that everyone ends up quite vague.
Yeah, and it's very difficult when you're trying to answer that question of, so what do you do?
Yeah, what's your niche? And like I think that's not how real life works. It's also not how a lot of stories work.
Yeah.
But I think Fate has quite a good middle ground between those things in like establishing your own thing, but having enough rules to fall back on. You can understand what they're doing.
Yeah.
However, we'll talk about the classes at great length later on.
In individual little sections.
We had skills. Domains used to be called knowledges. And it was more like skills is what you do, and domains is and knowledge is what you know. But I think we eventually filed them down so you could always combine one from both.
Yes, and it ties a little bit into changes we made with the characters.
Yeah.
In that the characters originally started as being from a specific place.
Yeah, some of them still are.
Some of them still are, but they all were about location rather than anything else. And we actually kind of stripped that out of the characters in a lot of cases and moved that towards domains.
Yeah. So skills are, if you've read a role-playing game before, you know what skills are.
Yeah.
We tried to boil down everything you could do. Like, and that's the thing, like, we wanted to have quite a light skill list. I think, like,
we did not want an encyclopedic skill list.
One of the things which I find quite boring is having, say, different skills for different weapons. Like, I'd much rather have a fight skill which lets you do all the fighting. I think we used to have black bag as a skill, didn't we?
Yep.
Which we cut because it didn't quite work. But black bag, it was one of my favourite skills. It was dirty fighting, basically. So it was like assassination. Stabbing one guy when he doesn't know you're there, as opposed to fight, which is like leading a group of people in a brawl, or taking part in open warfare. And eventually like black bag was so niche and so like difficult to work out where it slotted in that we just rolled it into fight.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I'm most proud of with the skills is how you can use different ones in different situations.
Yeah, that's fun.
For instance, you've got fight, which is open combat, doing stuff. But as a DM, I'd allow you to roll your sneak if that person is going to be completely unaware and you're just doing an assassination.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes from one of the games which has inspired me as a designer for many years is Wushu, and it was the first game I ran for Chris many moons ago. It was the first game I ran. The first game I ran as an adult was me and Chris in Chris's room doing a one-on-one game of Wushu. Where a situation, an intimate situation I never wish to repeat. Not because I don't like you, but because it's just really weird.
Yep.
Like pretending to be someone else for long enough. But we had a good time. The Wushu, just like you just pick the most suitable skill for what you're doing and roll some dice, and the skills are just names on fictional things that you attempt, and they're entirely open ended. So having sneak. As like the difficult part is not stabbing someone when they're asleep. The difficult part is sneaking in.
Yes.
Or let's say, for example, if you need to climb up a tower of silence at midday to get into the to chase someone, the difficult part is not the pursue check; it's the resist check because you're enduring the sunlight.
Yeah.
And
it's about picking what is key to the scene.
Yeah. And it lets people play to their strengths by negotiating that with the GM. But they're all pretty much self-explanatory. There's nothing hugely exciting or novel there. I think Pursue is an interesting one because it involves running away and running towards, but not athletics, as it were.
Yeah, like, it's not climbing. It's not.
Yeah.
Oh, there is a wall here. I wish to climb over it.
That's we don't have a climbing skill.
No.
We have Pursue and Sneak. And you can use, so I suppose, Pursue, Sneak, and Steal, and which, like, we wanted to have these as like, we wanted to have the ends in mind, because athletics is not really its own reward.
No.
It's rare you just do an athletics check for the sake of athletics. You're trying to get in somewhere, you're trying to overcome an obstacle, you're trying to run away from someone or outpace someone, and I think we wanted to have it in more of a, you are acting upon someone or upon something. And that was more interesting to us. Now, domains are a bit more exciting. What are domains, Christopher?
A bit more involved. So, a domain is an area of the city or a contact you might have.
Or I suppose like a culture or a knowledge base.
Yeah. So, for instance, the academia. Just take the first one, domain. That gives you an extra dice when you're dealing with academics or when you're in a district that is academic. because you know how to talk to academics, you know the layout of universities. It's that kind of learned knowledge from familiarity.
This is kind of weird. I will say, like, domains are a kind of they're a story game element much more than skills are, because it doesn't make a lot of sense that if you are, like, you can spend your entire life in universities. In real world terms, you wouldn't be any better at fighting someone if they were, say, a bursar, or if it happened in a library. But we wanted more to have it as a spotlight time. So, like, if you've got the academia domain, then everything you do around that is slightly more likely to succeed. So your character has that niche.
Yeah.
I also have a quick question for you. It says. It has the phrase practical etherics in the academia paragraph. What is practical etherics, Chris? Because I wrote that and I don't know.
We make up a lot of pseudoscience. Is what that is.
I used the word galvanic for a very long time without realising what it meant.
Yeah, I had to make him Google that.
So it had to make me Google it. Like, I think it was about 2 weeks in of me using it. You were like, actually, Grant, I don't know what that means. Shall we look it up?
Yeah. What? Were we using this correctly? Oh, turns out no.
It is chemical electricity.
Yeah.
But it's a lovely word, galvanic.
It is.
But
going back to what you're saying about spotlight time, it's nice to have that thing of, I know about technology. Yeah. I don't have any relevant skills here. I can't fix technology, but I still know about technology. I've lived near it.
Yeah, and so you can have a bash.
Have a bash.
Yeah, I think like things like high society is a really lovely skill to have, because the mask can feel quite. The master is a high society, like a servant class, and we wanted to have them as sort of quiet social as opposed to loud social. They're not brash, they're subtle, they manipulate rather than impress. And it's really nice having the capacity. So like once the majority of a campaign will take place out of high society, depending on where you're setting it. But most of the areas, the people you're fighting exist in high society. You exist in low society, and so the master can feel quite underpowered until you walk through the front door of a mansion. At which point, like they're at least doubling their chances of success at everything they do.
Yeah.
And it kind of covers. It's a really nice, vague way of covering, or not vague, broad way of saying this is what I do. This is my time to shine.
This is who I am.
Yeah, and I like those. The last thing. So this is a very short chapter. The last thing we have is knacks, which are a fairly late addition to the game.
Yeah, but I think they add quite a bit because we found halfway through that you could actually generate multiple skills, and not have a place to use them.
Yeah,
multiple of the same skills. So when you gain a skill domain a second time, you get a specific knack with it, which can give you an extra dice.
And these are specializations from World of Darkness. Basically, we've just filed the serial numbers off.
Yeah, it's a skill, but finer detail.
And it's fairly rare to get knacks, actually.
Yeah, it doesn't crop up a lot, but when it does, it's a nice thing for you, like, again, with that spotlight time. Yeah,
and I think it's quite nice in a way to sort of explore your character in a further way, to say, oh, you know what, I'm good at disguise. Oh, I'm really good at Prakatikos technology.
Yeah.
And so in a way, it lets you signal to the GM, this is important to me.
This is something I want the campaign to talk about at some point, at least.
Yeah. And that's it as far as skills and domains go. We wanted to keep them pretty broad. So you're never really sure you're never unsure as to which one to pick.
Yeah, you just pick whichever one makes the most sense to you.
Yeah. Also, we don't have levels like in skills or like points.
No, it's binary. You either have it or you don't.
You either have it or you don't, and you can get a knack in it. But yeah. Next up, equipment. The Spire Director's Commentary podcast is a companion to the Spire RPG and features Grant Howitt and Chris Taylor. The music is by Arokia, hosted on freesound.org and used under the Creative Commons license. To learn more about Spire, explore related products or buy your own copy, go to rowanrookanddeckard.com.